as I was as we're worshiping, and I was over there just worshiping, the Lord just told me like, hey, the worship team would have to do more of worship today than even me doing more of teaching. And a lot of y'all know me. One of my biggest struggles as a young preacher is I tend to go over time a lot. So because I have so much content and so much that God already gave to me for the word for today. And so I'm like, I'm struggling with that. But God is saying, well, we need to do more of worship. And that's what God is speaking. And we just have to, when the Spirit speaks, we have to listen. And so today I'm just going to admonish us for the next 10 or maximum of 15 minutes. And then we're going to have our worship team come back again and lead us into worship. How many of y'all know that in times of uncertainty like this, in times of uncertainty, or in these days that are filled of so much darkness, that worship is our greatest weapon. Worship is our greatest weapon. And so as individuals and as a society, over the past couple months, this has been a historical one, but a truly tough one for many people. We've gone through so many phases this year. This year kind of started out on a normal note, and then all of a sudden it took an abnormal twist. And now we're in a season where everything is all about the new normal. That term sometimes gets me because I'm like, what's the new normal? The new normal. If it's new, it's not normal. If it's normal, it's not new. So it's kind of an oxymoron in the very essence of it, right? The new normal is an oxymoron. And that's what God would have me speak on this morning, is the new normal. The new normal. And what God deposited in my heart is that before you can step or engage your season of new normal, kind of like we're all going through now, we're going to all have to go through 3 different phases. We're going to have to go through the normal phase. We're going to have to go through the abnormal phase before we can fully capitalize and engage our season of new normal. I want you to turn to your neighbor and kind of poke them and say, I'm normal. Well, you're not doing it. You poke them. Okay, well, you say I'm normal. Well, your neighbor is looking at you and saying, you got to be abnormal to poke me. Well, I know I'm normal. I'm normal, right? Some degree. We've had to all go through an abnormal phase of this coronavirus and of this pandemic. And now, even as a society, collectively, we're stepping into a phase of the new normal. And y'all, this experience is not unique to us as Christians. This experience, what we're going through right now, it's not unique to us as believers. As a matter of fact, what I found out was in the year 1918 or so, there was a mass pandemic similar to Corona that happened. As a matter of fact, like folks were wearing masks back then. There was a lot going on back then that is very similar. Churches were shut down, businesses were shut down. There was mass deaths back in 1920, also 1918 or 1920. And that season or that year marked the beginning of a new era all over the world as well. And I believe that even in the spiritual realm, that everything going on right now, it's marking a new season, even in the spiritual realm. And that's why, as a people, we have to be very spiritually sensitive and try to get an understanding of God's purpose for this season that we're in. Because what happens is, if you do not understand the purpose of a season or the pain or a crisis that you're going through, you're most likely to miss out of the blessing or the benefit of that season that God is trying to take you through. Which is what happened to the Israelites, right? The Israelites also went through the seasons that we're talking about, the normal phase, the abnormal phase, and the new norm. The Israelites in their normal phase was a phase of slavery in Egypt, where they were being whipped, where they were making bricks out of straws. That was a season of normal to them. And for so long, the Egyptians, they were satisfied with this season of norm. They were, just like a lot of us, sometimes we're comfortable with normal until God shifts us. Until God shifts us and takes us into a season of abnormal before setting us up for our new norm. So for many years, the Israelites were just satisfied with business as usual. They were satisfied with living just their everyday Christian life. You know, they were not really hungry for more. They were just satisfied with their condition until God raised a man called Moses. Until God raised a man who had an encounter to be able to liberate them out of that season of norm. And what I'm hearing in my spirit, man, is that this is a very unique season. And each one of us were created for a time like this. Esther chapter 4 verse 14 says that you and I, Minister J, you and I were created for a time like this. Just like the man Moses, to become a light and to give hope to such a dark world. But listen, the depth of the revelation or the solution that you can offer to this world in this season is tied to the depth of your personal encounter with God. It's tied to your revelation of who God is. And so even though the man Moses had grown up in Egypt and he was so accustomed to Egyptian ways, he was so accustomed to solving problems his own way, was why he tried to kill an Israelite, right? Because he was trying to take matters in his own hands. See, sometimes some of us are like that when we are in our season of normal or going through our seasons of abnormal. We try to take matters into our own hands. We try to solve it our own way. We try to do it our own way when going through that process without engaging God in an encounter. And so we go to Exodus chapter 3, where we find out that this man Moses had an encounter with God. Now, when people hear about the encounter Moses had with God, a lot of people focus on the interaction and the conversation between God and between Moses. But I need us to step aside for a split second and focus on the bush, in the burning bush experience. Because God showed up to Moses in that bush. Now, the thing about the bush was the bush allowed itself to remain completely helpless, or to remain as a vessel in the hand of God for God to use and to consume it. What I'm hearing is, you see, God is trying to do great exploits in you, through you in this season, but just like that bush, you have to open up yourself to be a vessel for God to use as a voice for our generation. I mean, the thing is, look, right now, so many people are looking for solutions to their problems. They are looking for solutions to their problems. They're looking in the wrong places for solutions, but it's the best time. It's the best time, Christians. It's the best time, young adults, for us to offer our light and our solution to the world around us. It is the best time. And so the bush, in the burning bush experience, gave itself up to God completely, just like God is calling you and I to do this morning. See, what is going on is sometimes a lot of us think, well, because we're in church or we attend church or because we are consumed with the things of God, that's enough to have an encounter with God that will transform this generation. But God is saying no. God is saying, I need you to come into a place of encounter where you're not just chasing after things. Many of us, when going through our season of abnormal, we tend to focus on God, I want you to do this for me. I want you to bless me with a job. I need you to bless me with this relationship. I need you to answer my prayer request in this area of my immigration. I need you to bless me with divine health. You see, why there's nothing bad about that, but God is saying in this season, we need to turn our focus away from just focusing on things and not also even be consumed by the things of God. Because, we heard from the story of Mary and Martha, you can be consumed in service, but when God looks at the condition of your heart, you're still not chasing after God himself. So don't be consumed with things or the things of God, but be consumed with the God of all things. And that's what the man Moses was. And that's why God positioned Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt from their season of normal and brought them into their season of abnormal. Now I need you to see what happens here in Numbers chapter 13. This is really important. They were at the verge of stepping into their new normal, into their new season. And see what happens in the book of Numbers chapter 13 verse 30. Numbers 13 verse 30. There's a man called Caleb, and I need you to see two different mindsets in the midst of a crisis. Two different mindsets in the midst of an abnormal season. Here's what Caleb said in verse 30. He said, look, he said to Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession, because we are well able to overcome it. But there were some other men in the next verse that said, you know what? We can't go possess our Canaan land, because the men there, they are way stronger than us. Now listen to what I'm about to say. This is very important. Be careful who you listen to in your season of crisis. In your phase of abnormal, while you're waiting on God for that job, while you're waiting on God for that divine health, while you're waiting on God for whatever it might be careful who you listen to. Be careful who you listen to. A lot of people are limited because of their mindset and because of the people they surround themselves with and who they listen to during their season of abnormal. Now we go over to Numbers chapter 14. They were still in their season of wilderness. See, before God takes you to a new norm, there's always that middle phase, which is the abnormal phase, which is kind of what we're all going through right now before stepping into a season of our new norm. That period is always a waiting period in the life of every woman, in the life of every man. But what makes the difference, all the difference in that season, again, is having an encounter with God. But you go to Numbers 14, what we find out is, this is really interesting. Numbers chapter 14, they were about to, see, in Numbers 13, they already listened to Caleb. They say, yes, we can do it. We're going to go ahead. We're going to go possess our land. Yes, we're going to step with faith. It's uncertain. Things look rough on the outside, but yes, we're going to just move forward. We're going to press forward with faith. But here in Numbers chapter 14, these folks start complaining just as they were about to step into their Canaan land. Numbers 14, chapter 1 to 4, they started complaining to the man Moses. Even though they've seen God perform so many miracles in the times past, just as some of us are in some dark season, but we've seen God do great and mighty things in the past, but we're still complaining and saying, God. They were complaining to Moses and said, why did you bring us out here, Moses? We would have preferred to stay in our season of normal because it was so comfortable staying in our season of normal. Why did you bring us out here, Moses? You should have just let us die in Egypt. See, nothing good comes out of us going back to Egypt, because you can never move forward if you're always bent on looking backward to Egypt. And so these people ultimately died in the wilderness and couldn't make it to their promised land. What we've seen during this season of COVID-19 is we've seen a lot of deaths. We've seen a lot of deaths on the physical. We've seen a lot of deaths on the physical. But God is saying for you to go and step and really engage the future like I want you to. I'm going to need you to die, but not die a physical death though. I'm going to need you to die to self so that you can fully engage the future ahead, the new norm ahead. These folks were complaining because they were so spiritually immatured. They were so spiritually immatured. Even though they've been around greatness, they've been around Moses, they've been around Aaron, they've seen great and mighty miracles happen. They've crossed the Red Sea, yet they were still murmuring and complaining just as they were on the verge of their breakthrough. Why? Because they were not sensitive, neither were they spiritually matured to be able to see what God has in stock for them in the new season. Listen, on your way to purpose in the new norm, in this new norm, you're going to go through a wilderness. It's going to be painful. It's going to be uncomfortable, just like we're collectively going through. But again, you have to engage God to understand what is the purpose. What is the purpose? Why is God taking you through this season? Otherwise, you end up wasting a crisis. Never waste a crisis. Ultimately, this generation of Israelites had to die for a new generation who had a different mindset to be able to eventually enter the promised land. I started off by saying, look, I'm normal. You're normal. We're normal because of our sin nature. We're normal because by default, each one of us is a sinner. I'm not any better than any of you listening to me on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, and I'm not any better than any of you listening to me here. I'm still a man under construction. I'm still a man that's vulnerable to sin. We are all sinners, have sinned and come short of the glory of God, and we are all normal in that sense. But God saw our normal state and did something abnormal. What was abnormal was that God sent His Son Jesus Christ to die in our place. That's abnormal. So that we can have newness of life, and so that we can enjoy an abundant life, so that we can have a different revelation in our season of new norm. And so, if you're listening to me today and you're like, I can't even relate to what he's talking about, I get it, yes, I've always been around God, I've been with God. As a matter of fact, once upon a time, I've had an encounter with God, but I just don't know what's going on anymore. God was once upon a time my first love, but I've departed from Him. God is inviting you back to a place of friendship this morning. God is inviting you to a place of friendship because, listen, I've been asking God and just waiting on God myself and saying, God, what is your purpose for the church as we reopen? Because I don't want us to reopen and go back to our old ways and go back to old business as usual. No. What is the new norm for the church even as we step into this new season? And as I've asked that question as a leader here, you should also ask that question yourself. And what God has ministered to me is that the new norm for us is to step into a season of revival and to step into a season of discipleship. That's what the new norm is going to be for our church. But before we can revive a city, each one of us, our hearts has to be circumcised and our hearts have to be revived before we can revive a city. Because it takes a light or it takes fire to light another fire. Which is why God had to reveal Himself to Moses in form of a fire. So if you're listening to me and you're saying, oh, I really hear this word and this has just made such an impact and I would like to give my life to Christ, I'd like for you to just bow your heads. And even if you've given your life to Christ before, but you want to rededicate your life, I would like you to just bow your heads wherever you are and just say this short prayer with me. Dear Jesus, I just want to surrender my life to you this morning. I give it up to you. I surrender completely to you, just like the bush and the burning bush, Lord. I ask, oh God, that you will purify me, oh God. I ask that you will refine me. I give myself away, Lord, to your will and to your way, oh God, for the Master's use. And as you've declared that prayer by faith this morning, I pray that God Almighty will begin to walk with you and that you begin to experience the fullness of God in your walk with Christ. In Jesus' mighty name, amen.